It's time for Howie Roseman to stop thrift shopping at the linebacker position. Off-season options for the linebacker position coming your way in today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, Eagles fans, to another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm Louis DiBiase, one of your co-hosts, also an analyst also over at Bleacher Report for the Birds. He's Gino Camilleri, scouting director, Eagles content at Bleacher Report, and my co-host on today's edition of Locked On Eagles. We find real higher probability solutions at linebacker through free agency, and we discuss what in-house players at this position can still have a role in 2024. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code in all capital letters, Locked On, for $20 off your first purchase. Gino, we were kind of joking before the show. We've been doing this offseason option series this week, going through edge rushers to add in free agency, defensive tackle. We'll go position by position. Linebacker is a huge need this year, as it tends to be every offseason. And I'm going through this list of free agents and all these big names and guys that probably will cash in this year. And I was thinking to myself, is just a useless exercise? Is how are we going to even consider any of these players? Hopefully he does this year. He does change his philosophy. I'm still very skeptical, though.
So you and I know what happened back in Buffalo when Snowvember occurred. This is when a whole bunch of snow dropped down. It was 6 feet. I studied for my final, Lou, for so long for my accounting courses, just for them to get pushed back an entire semester. And that's exactly what it feels like we do with linebacker every single year, that we get all of this information, we do all of this digging, try and find all of these guys that we're in love with, just for Howie Roseman to say, we'll worry about that next year. Well, next year's here, Howie Roseman, and he has to figure something out, because the Nakobe Dean plan, it's still just a plan. It hasn't come to fruition. At moments, he has flashed, but he hasn't been fully healthy. When he is a full-time starter, can he be that guy? And outside of him, it's been free agents. It's just been Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid, and not like the value, not like the name brand Band-Aids, like the value Dollar Tree. They're made out of plastic. You're like,
he's at the dollar store going the cheapest, even at the dollar store. He's finding the cheapest product he can find in that store.
Like Big Daddy takes the box and throws it at the ground so he could get it for 50 cents off, right? That's exactly what he's doing.
That was Zach Cunningham in August, yeah.
That was Shaq Leonard with just...
That was Myles Jack.
The worst tape you'll ever see at linebacker in Philadelphia.
And, look, I mean, me and you on the show have said linebacker should be the position you probably invest the least amount in outside of anything, probably except for running back. So Howie Roseman does have the right idea of positional value, but he takes it, and we've said this on the show a lot, he takes it so far where you don't never invest in this position any sort of premier assets outside of spending a third-round pick on Nakobe Dean. Like you said, throughout Howie Roseman's pretty much his entire tenure running the front office, it has been Band-Aid signing every single year. And sometimes it works out in the form of Nigel Bradham, Kyzir White, an undrafted player in TJ Edwards. Sometimes it does work, but oftentimes it doesn't. Sometimes you get Eric Wilson, and who was the one guy from Denver? Corey Nelson, I think. It doesn't always work. He did spend a third-round pick on Davion Taylor as well, but you can't even really give him credit for Michael Kendricks, and that didn't work. Michael Kendricks in the second round was more of an Andy Reid pick, in my opinion. That was when Andy had a lot of control in the front office. So every single year, it's kind of been the same strategy, and I just don't think it's sustainable. Yes, like you shouldn't invest first-round pick after first-round pick at this spot, but you need at least one premier asset going into one of these positions here, because again, you look at the San Francisco 49ers, for instance, what they had with a Fred Warner. You don't have a Fred Warner. You don't need two Fred Warners, but I would like to try for at least one. And like you mentioned with Nakobe Dean, it's still a very unknown. He hasn't played football in 2 years, basically. We don't know what we've got in that kid still. I don't want to bank on him being that version of Fred Warner for you.
Because if you do, and he goes down, you're in this exact same scenario that you were in last year, where it's It's just a hope. It's just grasping at straws. Maybe one of these guys will get serviceable play like Zach Cunningham got for you last year. And we're not saying you have to pay what Fred Warner's getting $19 million
there's a middle ground.
Roquan's getting $20 million a year. That's never going to happen. That's not Howie Roseman.
There's a massive middle ground, though, from where Howie is, Gino, versus that approach.
The TJ Edwards situation is the one where it's like, $6 million should have been enough to say.
And he was great this year, by the way.
He was very good. And there was a report, we don't know how true it is, that he didn't even get a contract offer from Philadelphia.
Him and Kyzir White, it sounded like.
It seems like he was going to go to Chicago anyway because that is his hometown team. But regardless, you have to find somebody that can be a constant like TJ was for you, because all those guys you mentioned, Lou, they had 1, maybe 2 good years. Who was the only one that really was a foundational piece for you in the middle for multiple seasons? It was TJ Edwards. And was he even an elite player? No. Was he even a great player? No. He was good enough at enough things. He didn't miss tackles. He got to his landmark. He filled against the run. He learned how to cover in the National Football League. That's what you have to develop. And it's not just one guy in Nakobe Dean. It's taking multiple swings at that position. Because if you don't, where are we again, Lou? We're right back to square one, where you're grasping at straws, and we have the same conversation that you probably are sick of hearing year over year here about the linebacker position at Locked On Eagles, and probably any show you listen to regarding this team, because it's not like it's something in the back of the room, like an ugly decoration where like, are we going to address this? No, this is something that's right in our face. It has slapped Howie Roseman time and time again. And look what happened down the stretch, Lou. They had nobody to defend the middle of the field. They got exposed against the run. They got exposed against the pass.
Yeah.
And today, in today's modern game, linebackers are as instrumental as ever.
Especially in this scheme, Gino.
Yes. Yes, you have to be able to cover. You have to be able to be smart, know everybody else's assignment while knowing your assignment. You have to be fast. You have to be instinctual. When's the last time the Eagles had a collection of guys like that? It was for 1 year with Kyzir and TJ Edwards. You have to at least hope you can get something. And I think there are some linebackers in the free agent pool that aren't going to break the bank for you.
Right.
That can definitely come in and provide at least one, insurance if Nakobe Dean comes down. 2, somebody that could be a partner for Nakobe. And 3, if you do have somebody that you bring in with the premier pick in the draft, somebody that's at least a veteran. I keep saying this, but they need to mold these young players. That's what they have to do. They have to find the next man up at linebacker. They haven't been able to do that. I mean, they've done that once in a decade, it feels like, Lou. You get it once, like every Haley's Comet, you'll find a linebacker for the Eagles.
And that's the thing is, Nakobe Dean is not a player that I'm giving up on, but hearing...
No, he's still going to be a starter for them next year.
Absolutely. He can't be your plan A and B, and your other plan is we'll bring back Zach Cunningham. Like, sure, I'd love Zach Cunningham back on another 1-year deal, a low-end contract.
Yeah, as your 4th guy.
Yeah, he was a fine rotational player last year for you, considering you got him at the end of August. Like, he far exceeded expectations, but that in-house promotions basically at this position cannot be your plan. And hearing Howie Roseman talk in his press conference about Nakobe Dean and how he mentioned letting White and Edwards go because of their confidence in Nakobe to be that green dot player does make me a little nervous that I think Howie might be bullish at the spot. But like you said, you don't have to go out there and spend $19 million annually on a Fred Warner. No. There is a middle ground here, and there's a lot of options in that way in free agency. We'll get into those options coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. Today, Gino and I are talking about how we really feel about the linebacker position, how Howie Roseman just will not invest in this spot. Therapy, though, can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than the Eagles investing in linebacker. It's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Just visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. Once again, that's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You're going to get 10% off your first month of online therapy. We thank BetterHelp for sponsoring the Locked On Eagles podcast today. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. It's off-season options. We continue on with the linebacker position, Gino, and as we mentioned, there's a big middle ground between what Howie's been doing every year, just Band-Aid signing after Band-Aid signing, versus taking two linebackers in the first round and, throwing a huge contract at a big-name free agent. Like, you don't have to go that overboard. There is a middle ground here, and I think there's a lot of free agents like that can be a good complement to Nakobe Dean, that can be that plan B. And I think, the queen of the chessboard that's in this pool is a guy that you mentioned in your offseason simulation series. It's a guy me and you loved. The only guy we ever mocked at linebacker to the Birds in our Locked On NFL mock draft, it's Patrick Queen. Like, if there is a guy that Howie was going to change his philosophy for and offer a big contract to, it would be Patrick Queen, and I'm all in on that idea.
Over the cap, currently has his contract valued at $13.2 million. If Howie Roseman does that, I would be shocked.
Yeah, like Queen, if they sign Queen, that's, he's changing his ways.
Would he be willing to do that and go north of $10 million
I can't see
at
it.
that position?
I would love Queen in this defense
know.
next to Dean. I can't see it.
I can't see it. I can't see him changing his philosophy that much.
Yeah.
And in this pool, I believe Patrick Queen is going to get bid up. Because
probably,
if you look at this free agent pool for linebackers, it's Patrick Queen. It's guys like Frankie Louvu.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple more that you can mention that might be like bell of the ball type guys that are younger. Kenneth Murray, if that's your cup of tea. But I don't believe Drue Tranquill is going to break the bank for you. And I don't believe Josey Jewell is going to break the bank for you.
Right.
I mean, what about Jordan Brooks, Lou?
That was going to say, Gino, outside of Patrick Queen, Jordan Brooks might be my second favorite idea. He's only 26 years old, a former first or second round selection. Clint Hurt was his defensive coordinator for the last 2 years in Seattle. He's with Philly now. He had career highs last year in coverage grades and pass rush, according to Pro Football Focus. That's a move that, if you're not going to get Queen, like the next best thing, if you're going to invest a little more at linebacker, I really like the idea of Jordan Brooks.
And in our offseason simulations, I did hand out a big contract to Patrick Queen, and that was me playing the role of general manager. And that's the differentiating factor.
Yeah,
and would I love to see Patrick Queen come in and be somebody who instantly solves a lot of things for you, and it'll allow Nakobe Dean to, I think it would be a good yin and yang between them to alleviate some of the pressure, like you see Roquan Smith, who came in there for Baltimore, and it made it easier on Patrick Queen. And I think that would be a good give and take, but there are a lot of guys that if you threw them in there, they would be good enough, like the conversation that we were having, Lou, and you're not going to have to spend double digits at this position. And heck, he didn't even want to pay Kyzir White. What was that, $4 million last year, Lou?
It was nothing.
You talk about Jordan Brooks, he's valued around $4.6 million. I think Howie Roseman would be willing to try and get somebody like him in under that number. What about a guy who just won a Super Bowl, Lou? Willie Gay. Do you think he's going to get paid a lot of money?
I don't think so. And this is a former second-round pick in 2020 we both really liked. I like both Chiefs linebacker options. Tranquill was a guy that said the Eagles, he was almost going to sign with the Birds last year, and he is not great against the run, but, pretty solid coverage numbers. I looked it up before the show. He recorded 36 stops in coverage since 2022, and his .85 yards per coverage snap allowed over that span they're both top 25 marks. So if you want to improve in coverage at linebacker, which the Eagles desperately need, like I like the idea of one of those KC guys, and the Chiefs got to pay a lot of players.
And this market is full of guys like that we were talking about, Lou.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to the one point. If there was like an overarching story of what I want this free agency to be, it's guys like Willie Gay, who are 26 years old, just played and won back-to-back Super Bowls. And like you're saying, Lou, was this like the most talented Kansas City roster of all time? No. But there are guys that they have to pay, and they're going to lose other guys like Willie Gay and Drue Tranquill. And that's frankly what happens when you are a good football team, but that allows a team like the Philadelphia Eagles to go and poach those players. That happened to Philly last year. Why not do exactly what happened to you, Philadelphia, where you lost 2 of your linebackers, 2 of your safeties, multiple guys throughout other positions on the field? Go and do that to Kansas City. I think that's a great move. I think 26-year-old Willie Gay would be such a smart move. 29-year-old Drue Tranquill would be awesome. I mean, would you pay Kenneth Murray a little bit more? He's only valued at $5 million. He's a little more injured in and out of the lineup.
I don't love Murray as much, especially in a coverage sense, which is something I'm focused on. I think, a lot of what you do at linebacker depends on how you want to use Nakobe Dean next year. Like if you want him as your green dot Mike, you might want a guy like Panthers linebacker Frankie Louvu, who's explosive, flows off the ball more. Like he can be that will spot. He had $43 million. Pressures.
He's got that contract value.
Yeah, Louvu he can fly, and he's one of the best pressure linebackers at rushing the quarterback. If you want somebody playing off Nakobe Dean a little bit more, Devin White kind of makes sense in that way too. The issue with those two guys are some coverage liabilities. However, if you want Nakobe Dean being that guy, flowing off the ball at the will spot, there's some older guys like, Josey Jewell is solid at everything. He's not elite in any category, but he's just real solid. He can play the mic. If you want a Bobby Wagner or Levante David, they're not the same players as they used to be, but if you want that Mufasa to the Simba that is Nakobe Dean, those guys are options too. So I think it really depends on, what you want out of Dean this year. Could depend on the style of linebacker that you target.
Where we go to our discussion with the edge position with Hassan Riddick, right? Like, do you need a star at that position if you were to lose Hassan? For sure. Do they want a star now, even with Nakobe Dean? That's what you're saying. Like, where do they forecast him as? Is Nakobe the guy, or is he a guy for you? And if you take the approach of going for the guy, Frankie Louvu should be right in that conversation for you. And I think Devin White is somebody who could garner interest. And there's so many guys, man. I mean, heck, even lower down the list, a guy like Akeem Davis-Gaither, who you and I were both high on coming out of the draft a couple years ago, or heck, Devin Bush played for the Seahawks last year. He only played 21% of the snaps, but they're not just going to need to bring in one guy, Lou. It's going to have to be multiple guys because Shaq Leonard's a free agent. Nicholas Morrow is a free agent. Sean Bradley's a free agent.
Zach Cunningham
is a free agent. You have one guy on the roster, technically, outside of Ben VanSumeren, and you lost Christian Ellis last year. They need to completely overhaul. This is a complete overhaul of a position, and they have to change it in the way that Vic Fangio wants the linebacker position, because all of these guys we suggest could be great, but if Fangio wants to bring in a completely different look at linebacker and he wants to go heavy at the outside linebacker position and invest more money there and stick with what Howie likes to do on the interior of the linebacker position, well, this exercise could all be for naught, and everything we just said doesn't even matter. And
that's what I feel like could probably happen.
To another degree, if Fangio walks in that room and says, I need 1 or 2 studs in this defense next year, if we want to have a chance to compete, well, we'll see on day 1 or 2 of free agency if Howie goes and strikes. Then we'll see immediately that Vic really needs those guys, or his defense and his image is not going to succeed. And will Howie Roseman allow that to happen again? A defense that doesn't have what it needs, a defense that is on its heels, a defense that puts this offense at a negative situation.
Right.
If they have to pay, they have to pay, Lou.
I think they will likely go more tier 2 at this position. But coming up next, I do want to get into who we think is most likely to sign with the Eagles and then who we'd want the most at linebacker as offseason options continues right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
Today's edition of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. If you've ever had a bad situation getting tickets, like myself, one time I went on Craigslist, I sent the guy some money on Venmo, and I got scammed. And I said, never, ever, ever again. And since then, I've only used one site to get my tickets, and it is Game Time. And Game Time is incredible because they have all sorts of things that make it the best app to get your tickets. They have last-minute ticket flash deals, zone deals. You just scroll through whatever game that you want to go to, and you don't even have to click into the ticket. You could see right from the view of your seat without even having to go into the detail of the tickets. The lowest price guaranteed, and they will protect you against getting scammed like I did way back when. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, Gino, so the Eagles, they need help at linebacker. Like you said, they need to make multiple big moves. Even if it's not multiple free agent contracts, you got to have at least one big signing. You got to draft a linebacker in the top 4 rounds, you would hope. Because like you said, outside of Nakobe Dean and Ben VanSumeren, there are no other linebackers under contract for this football team. Gun to your head, if you had to say right now, like the Eagles make one bigger move at linebacker, comparatively speaking, who is Howie Roseman most likely to sign? And then who would be your guy?
I think it's one and the same. I think Drue Tranquill. I think that interest, if they had it last year, it's only going to be warranted again after the play that he had.
I wrote down Tranquill too. I think Howie, most likely, it would be him or, to me, Josey Jewell from Denver.
And that comes down to what Fangio needs in his guy, right?
Yeah.
And I think Tranquill and Josey Jewell, 29, 30 years old, solid, are going to do enough for you to get by, and it'll be a good person to have in there to transition this defense and have somebody that can play and be on the field too. Because, I mean, Lou, like it or not, Nakobe Dean, it might not even be a discussion even if he's in the lineup because he might be hurt. You might have to have guys that can stay on the field. Drue Tranquill, he played all those games last year, man. He got through the Super Bowl. He won that thing. He was a rogue grader. You got multiple guys in this team that were in and out of the lineup. How much of a deficit did that put on it, Lou? How much of a deficit did it put on them changing up the green dot collar in an already chaotic defense?
Right.
If Tranquill is there for 17 games plus the playoffs, that's an automatic win for you. Same with Josey Jewell, Lou. He'll be there. He'll be solid. You sign him or Tranquill. You have Nakobe Dean. You can then go and, I mean, heck, there's a whole bunch of other guys that you can bring into the conversation that could service minutes for you. I mean, Devin Bush could be even another low-end signing for you. That could be your 3rd or 4th guy, and even draft another guy as well, because you're going to have to fill this room with 5 or 6 guys.
I will say, hopefully in this scenario, if they brought in like a Tranquill or they brought in a Josey Jewell type, you would hope there's a bigger move coming either through the draft or in free agency. That means they paid a safety more money, right? And they didn't feel the need as much to have a Patrick Queen through linebacker because they just spent a lot of money on, I don't know, Antoine Winfield Jr. or Xavier McKinney, or they're spending a first-round pick at safety. And that's the type, or like a Jeremy Chin, that hybrid type of player.
Ooh, yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like in this scenario, hopefully there was a bigger move coming either through the draft at linebacker or they made a big investment at safety. That's the thing is, I won't be as bullish on linebacker, a huge investment, if they do go for a safety. I just think between those two positions, there's got to be one stud that you bring in, one huge difference maker, because I think in this defense especially, and especially in the modern day NFL, those aren't positions you can just Band-Aid your way through anymore, and I don't like that approach.
And in back-to-back seasons, are you going to lose, yet again, a majority of your room from that position.
And these are communicators
Frankly,
on this
yes.
defense. I think the position's too important to have this much change every single year.
And you're going into your fourth play caller and third defensive coordinator.
Right, you need some
technically,
continuity.
in the last 3 years. You do.
And look how
need
bad communication
continuity.
was, Gino, last year, and like coverage. It was a mess the second half of the year.
I mean, it was a mess right off the bat.
The whole
I mean,
season.
when those young
basically.
players came in, it was just a breakdown in communication time and
Right.
time and time again. And Vic Fangio is going to demand a lot of detail out of these guys, and he is going to need guys with a high football IQ in the middle of that defense. And that's why Tranquill and that type of prototype of linebacker makes so much sense. Is it the flashiest? No. Is it the Honda Civic Toyota Camry that's going to get you 250,000 miles and you're saying, how are you driving this car from 2002? Yes, exactly. That's what that guy is going to be. And equate it to, heck, man, somebody else who plays for the Broncos, Alex Singleton, who was in Philadelphia. Was he the greatest? Absolutely not. Did he get the job done for you? Heck yeah. And he's been playing for the Broncos and playing meaningful minutes for them.
Yeah.
You need to find that type of player, another TJ Edwards, somebody that is good enough. And if you got him here for 3 years, can continue to develop, because that's what they lack as well, Lou. I mean, Sean Bradley was never on the field enough to go out there and develop. That's no fault of his own with the injuries that he has had. Davian Taylor wasn't developed into the player that they wanted him to be. Nakobe Dean still hasn't developed, and we're going to see if the next guy that they draft can be developed. And if they bring in a 26-year-old player that we are talking about, do you trust the coaches that are in there to continue to develop them? You better hope so, or there is a true revolution that has to occur in that personnel department at that linebacker position, because you can't hit on one every 15 years. It can't happen.
I don't hate the idea. Again, Josey Jewell will be fine. Tranquill would be fine. I do want a little more upside. The guy I would prefer the most is a Jordan Brooks. I know it would be a little bit tougher with his injury history combining with Nakobe Dean. It's like, do you want to bank on two young guys that are kind of injury prone? But I do want some ceiling, because I really would love that difference maker at this position. Just one of them. And between Brooks and Dean, it's like hopefully one of them would pan out in that way. Those are two guys that, heading into the NFL, were top prospects at the linebacker position. But we'll see. As long as they just got to do something. Even like Josey Jewell and Tranquill, as sad as it is, Gino, like those would be two of the biggest moves you've made in free agency in a while. Like Kyzir White really wasn't, even though it panned out, it wasn't really a big move at the time. They really have never made a big splash at this position ever under Howie Roseman running the show.
I'm trying to think.
Nakobe Dean's the biggest thing he's ever done. And Davian Taylor, I guess. But even Taylor was, when they took him in the third round, people were like, that was kind of high. I mean, he's an upside player, but he's very new to the position, and it's going to be a project. So Dean was like the only splash move. You're like, this guy should be a difference maker right away, and that hasn't even panned out. So he didn't trade for Kiko Alonso. Andy Reid was the guy behind D'Amico Ryans and Michael Kendricks for the most part. Chip drafted Jordan Hicks, who, by the way, is a free agent too. Do not want that reunion. But I think it's time. This is the year you got to do it. The 49ers exposed you, and guess what? They're not going away. That team needs to be attacked with linebacker play and safety.
They have to do it now, because you can't have the same conversation year over year. I think the
last year
element
cost
that
them.
they're
It
missing,
really cost them.
Where would you be if you had at least one of TJ Edwards and or Kyzir White?
I don't think you lose 6 of 7 games. I don't think it was the reason for the collapse, but it was a huge reason.
Because either one of them could have been the number one, and Kyzir was the number one at times, and TJ was the number one at times, and then you went into a season where you had no proven number one, and that's just a tough strategy at any position, because you're throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on at that point, because you have no proven commodity. You have to develop and keep proven commodities at this position, or you're going to have to shell out money to get these guys, and that's frankly the route that they're going to have to take. If Howie Roseman can finally put his ego aside at this position and be willing to pay one of these guys, it would be nice to go and get a Patrick Queen. Are we banking on it? No.
It would be nice.
Are they going to go get the car that's going to get them from point A to point B? That's probably what they're going to do.
I could totally see. He did this when he drafted Miles Sanders in the second round. He's like, see, the Eagles care about running backs. Like, we prioritize running back. Hopefully that's what happens again this time around. He signs a big name linebacker or drafts one. It's like, see, we care about linebacker in Philadelphia. I'm not going to bet on it, but I am hopeful for sure that in a month we will see that result. We'll see what happens. We got you covered right here on Locked On Eagles. It's going to do it for today's edition of the show, though. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.